The man I'm about to introduce to you, I met in 2009, and he had a campaign sign that he gave to me, and I said to him, I'd like you to sign it. And he signed it. He never signed his name, but he signed it, the Tea Party candidate. And I have that sign hanging on my garage wall to this day. And so Alan Wilson has done a fantastic job as Attorney General for South Carolina. And we'd love to have him as Attorney General as long as he chooses to hold that office. But what he has shown us in his tenure there is that we're going to be looking for Alan should he have higher aspirations. So I'd like you to give you a warm welcome for Attorney General Alan Wilson.
Joe, all I ever have aspired to is to be in your garage, and I've achieved it. Listen, everybody, thank you so much. This is my 5th time attending this conference, and I just want to say that when you ever look at I use sports analogies a lot, and whenever a football team, a basketball team, or a baseball team is undergoing transformation, whenever they're trying to get better or whenever they're trying to get refocused, the coach always takes them back to the basics, takes them back to the fundamentals, where they learn the elementary things that got them to that league that they're in. And every year, I kind of come back to this conference, this convention, and that's my way of going back to the fundamentals. You never forget where you came from. And so coming back here and talking to all of you is my way of getting back to the core fundamentals of what it means to be in good government. I'm going to talk about a lot of things really fast because I know your time's important to you, and there may be other folks coming up right after me. But first, the last 5 years as your Attorney General has crystallized my thinking about what I believe good government should be. And I'm going to talk to you about what my vision is for good government based on my experience as Attorney General. You look at what's happening at the federal level, you look at what's happening at the state level, and it's scary, and a lot of people don't like what they see. I don't like what I see. In the last 5 years, I have either sued or been involved in lawsuits or legal actions against the Obama administration. Thank you. You can clap. Over 30 legal actions I've been involved with, whether it's challenging the Environmental Protection Agency's administrative fiat, whether it's their regulation of the Clean Power Plan or the waters of the U.S., which, by the way, they're trying to redefine what a water of the U.S. is so that if you have a ditch going through your backyard that might fill up with water from time to time, you'd have to get a federal permit, not a state permit or even a county permit, a federal permit to be able to use your land the way you want. It's a land grab by the federal government to try to regulate by environmentalists is what it is. Whether it's Yucca Mountain, who the administration unilaterally said, we're going to keep the billions of dollars you sent us in fees to explore and develop that repository for nuclear waste, but you can keep your own nuclear waste, and we'll keep the money. We sued them on that. Court said they were wrong on that. Whether it's the immigration overreach, where they rewrote immigration law, it was basically amnesty through executive order, and the states, I joined Governor Greg Abbott on that lawsuit, and we've won. It's going to probably be going up to the Supreme Court now, but we've won at every level. We've challenged the administration on that. Whether it's Obamacare or Dodd-Frank, which basically are massive 2,000-page laws designed to centralize power in the federal government. Every single time I look up, it's just another thing rolling out of Washington, D.C. The National Labor Relations Board trying to enforce union bosses' agendas down the throats of folks like you who have a very pro-free market view of the world. This is a state where we are a right-to-work state. By over nearly 90%. Even Democrats believe in it in South Carolina. It's a state issue, and we've chosen that, but they want to circumvent that. And then you go to the state level. Now, I don't have as much frustration at the state level, but I can tell you in the last several years I've had to deal a lot with state government, and my views of that have been crystallized. So I laid in bed a couple months ago, and I'm thinking about all these things that I'm talking publicly with all of you about, and I'm thinking, like, what can we do as a state? What can we do to change government? What is good government? And I came up in the back of my head, and one day I was on a long run. I was actually in military duty, and I was going on a long run, and I started thinking about that thought. And I came up with what I believe are the 5 basically tenets or attributes of good government, the 5 pillars of good government. And it's very easy to remember. It's responsibility, predictability, accountability, profitability, and stability. And I'm going to talk about each of those in a minute. Every single issue that we talk about, every single issue that you guys listen to, and every time a public official stands before you and talks about they're going to do something, put it through that 5-way test. First, we work hard for our money. We elect people, and we give them our tax dollars. We give them authority, and we give them power. You've given me authority and power as your Attorney General. Are they responsible with it? Responsibility is the first tenet. Are they responsible with what you have given them? First, if they're not responsible, then they shouldn't be there to begin with. Is the system or the process in our government, is it a responsible system? Is it a responsible process? That's number one. Number 2, predictability. Now you're thinking, what does that have to do with anything? First off, government and government officials should never act erratically or arbitrarily. But oftentimes, you do X thinking Y will happen and Z happens. You make a business decision. Any business owners out here or people who ran a business at one time, you made business decisions. You make decisions on how to spend your money and your family based on things that you know. But when unelected bureaucrats rule through administrative fiat, they change the rules as they go based on their own political agenda, not through the rule of law, not through the legislative process. So government becomes unpredictable. We all know that if we drive 80 in a 70-mile-an-hour zone, we could get what? A ticket. If we steal something, we could go to jail. It's very clear. Government should be predictable. If you do X, then Y will happen. Oftentimes, government's not predictable. The third tenet, accountability. This is one that I know a lot about. Government should be accountable to the people. You should also know who the actors are. Who are they accountable to? If government is not, if you give them a lot of power and they're not responsible and they're not predictable, then who do you go to hold them accountable? And see, for government to be accountable, it's got to be several things. First, government's got to be as transparent as possible. With the exception of military and law enforcement operations that could endanger lives, you should understand everything your government is doing. You should know about processes and how decisions are made. You, the people, need to have a transparent government. That is the first rule for being accountable, transparency. The second, got to have a clear chain of command. You know, you got to know, in order to know who's accountable, you got to know who to go to. Right now, let's look at our education system in South Carolina. There's a lot of debate on how money should be spent, and that's a very, 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 let me say it one more time, very important debate. But look at our system of government. Who's accountable? We all know every governor in the country has an education agenda, but we also in South Carolina elect a statewide superintendent of education. You get to vote on them, but guess what? That superintendent is limited because they also sit on a state board of education with a bunch of other folks. So you have a state board of education that governs the curriculum for our state. Then you have the Commission on Higher Education. And then you go to the legislature, you got the Education Committee in the Senate. You have the Education Committee in the House. Then you go down to the local levels, and you have all these school districts, and God knows, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, some of these school districts are off the chain. We had a prosecution recently in which we prosecuted somebody. The school district wasted $400,000 on legal fees defending that person. The person ended up pleading guilty, and they paid the lawyer $400,000. Okay, but who is in the chain of command? Who do you hold accountable for our education system? Because everybody's got power, but nobody's responsible with it or for it or accountable for it. You got to know. You got to follow the power up the chain to one person, to a decision maker. So first, remember, you got to have government in order to be accountable. It's got to be transparent, and you got to have a clear chain of command. Now, here's another one. Government, for it to be accountable, there's got to be checks and balances that have to be followed. That's Constitution 101. Let me talk to you something that I'm very interested in, and for a very obvious reason: judicial reform, how we elect our judges. Now, most people don't think that's an issue. They think that's lawyer stuff. Don't talk to me about that. If you ever find yourself as a civil plaintiff or a civil defendant or a criminal defendant or a victim of a crime, who you're standing in front of in a courtroom should be extremely important to you. But they may be ruling on a business issue. They may be ruling on a life issue. But how they got there and who controls them and who controls that process is important. They may be the best person in the world, and we have a lot of wonderful judges. But here's how a judge is elected in South Carolina. And you tell me if this is a good check and balance system. The General Assembly has what's called a Judicial Merit Selection Commission. It's comprised of 10 people. Of those 10 people, all of them are appointed by the leadership of the General Assembly. 6 of the 10 are actually members of the General Assembly, with the other 4 being non-members who are appointed by the General Assembly. So they control the selecting and vetting process. Then that commission nominates 3 candidates to the General Assembly. Then the General Assembly turns around and votes on the very people that they vetted and selected to be the candidates. Then they get to vote for them. And then the winner goes and gets on the bench. Who do you think writes the budget for the judiciary? The General Assembly. Where is the executive involvement in there? Well, the governor gets a veto, right? The veto. Does that seem like a sufficient check? Because we know vetoes get overridden all the time. In fact, almost every time. So there's absolutely 0 checks and balances. And if you ever want to know if that means anything, just try to prosecute a very powerful politician in front of a judge that they elect. We need judicial reform, ladies and gentlemen. Our system of government demands it. We should demand it. So we talked about transparency. We talked about chain of command. We talked about the checks and balances. We also need an engaged public. We need an engaged people. You've got to be engaged, and you are. But we got to. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of empty seats here. We got to have more folks at these things. Engagement is so vital to an accountable government. We've got to have more people engaged, because when people act like they don't care, then politicians love that. I'm telling you, it's absolutely true. So the first 3 big, basically attributes of good government are responsibility, predictability, and accountability. And we talked about how to be accountable. You've heard my views on that. There's another area. The other 2 tenets of good government are profitability. Now, that's a byproduct of good government. And what I mean, and profitability doesn't necessarily mean more money, although when government is responsible and predictable and accountable, it spends money wisely, your money wisely, it invests it wisely, and what do you get? You get a more profitable community, a more profitable state. You're more profitable. You can determine how to spend your money better than some educrat or bureaucrat in state government or federal government. The more money we leave, and don't you just love it when they say, if we cut taxes, we're going to lose this much dollars in revenue? You ever heard that argument on the talking heads on national TV? They're going to lose this much revenue if we cut taxes by this much. What are y'all going to do with your tax? You can go put it in a hole in your backyard? No. You're going to invest it. You're going to use it. You're going to spend it. That money comes back in other ways, but it should go based on how you want to spend your money, not how the government wants to spend your money. Profitability. We all profit. We profit in our lives, we profit in our livelihoods, we profit in our businesses, we profit in our churches, we profit with our infrastructure. Everything profits when the government does things the right way. Last, stability, stable. How many people just want to go to their work, come home, go to their kids' or grandkids' football or basketball game on Saturday, go to church on Sunday, and then do it all over again the next week? You don't want to be afraid. Think of how much better our lives would be if the federal government, you take away the fear created by the federal government. You take away the uncertainty and the unpredictability and the erratic behavior of government officials. If you knew exactly that your money was being spent well and that your infrastructure was being managed well and then the government system was being managed well, think of how much better life would be. Stability. That is the end state of good government. If you make a government that is responsible, predictable, accountable, and profitable, then stability is all we want. Let government do the basic core functions and then get out of the way. So I want to tackle government reform, I want to tackle ethics reform, and I want to tackle judicial reform. I talked to you briefly about judicial reform. We got to get the executive branch in the pot. We got to get them vested in that branch of government, because you can't only have criminal defense lawyers and civil plaintiffs lawyers on the bench. We've got to have more prosecutors and civil plaintiffs lawyers, people who defend businesses. We got to have the General Assembly out of the selection process, in the election process, but you got to have the executive branch involved. That is the first thing we've got to do, and there are half a dozen ways to do that, and I'm not going to go through them up here today, but that is so important. because businesses look at states and they look at the litigation environment, and they want to go to a state where they're going to get a fair shake through the judicial process. That's the first thing. Government reform. You know, the governor is elected to up to 2 terms, 4 years, and then they can run a second time, and if they're fortunate, they get reelected to a second term. Have to raise millions of dollars to get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of votes in order to serve 2 terms. The governor doesn't even run the entire executive branch of government, but they have a large impact on it. But they're accountable to all the people. Love or hate a governor, the governor answers to all people, and they are term limited, and then they rotate out. Let's go to the other 2 branches of government. The Speaker of the House, by the way, the Speaker of this House is a wonderful man. He's engaging, he's approachable, he's honorable, he's ethical. I have a great working relationship with him. But systemically speaking, I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about systems in our government. The Speaker of the House only gets elected by a small House district. Then once they get 63 votes from their peers in the House, they have statewide power, statewide presence. They control half of the legislative branch of government and only have to get elected in a small House district, and they only get that power from 63 votes, not millions. 63 votes gets them to be Speaker. The pro tem of the Senate, again, like the one we got, I get along with him fine. He's never bothered me. But systemically speaking, the pro tem of the Senate only has to get 24 votes. They run the state Senate. Those 2 people run an entire branch of government, and they only have to get 63 and 24 votes respectively to have that kind of power. And guess what? They can stay there for as long as they want. Oh, it gets better. Go to the judiciary. If you go to the judiciary, the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court controls basically the careers of every judge in the state. How many judges are there? Several hundred. If you count the several hundred magistrates, the circuit judges, the appellate judges, the family court judges, and then the Supreme Court, one person runs. All they have to do is get 51% of the vote in the General, that's 86 votes of the General Assembly. They get to be the Chief Justice for a decade before they get challenged again. They don't have, none of these people have to rotate out of office. They can stay there for as long as they want. What I suggest is this. The executive branch has to rotate the governor out every so many years. All right, folks, in the other 2 branches, you should have to live under the same rules. You know, the Speaker and the pro tem should be term limited to that position. They can stay in the General Assembly if their local constituents want them there. But rotate out of power and live under the culture that you've created. Be Chief Justice for 2 years and then rotate out. Be an associate justice. Why do you get to run government for a decade or for 20 years and you don't have to be accountable to the people that you're lording over? It's a no-brainer. That's the first thing. Government reform. We got to change our system of government. You see, our system, our Constitution in South Carolina was written in 1895 by a bunch of people who didn't want there to be an accountable chief executive. They wanted all the power retained in one branch of government. And that's how our Constitution was written. And with a few changes over the last century, it is pretty much left unchecked. We have got to reform how government is accountable to you, the people, and how it holds itself accountable. Ethics reform. Transparency, ladies and gentlemen. Sunshine. You ever seen cockroaches hanging out in the middle of a lit room? No. You cut light on in my basement, they scamper to the 4 corners. You leave the lights on right there, no roaches out here, but you cut the lights off, guess what? They can move ingress and egress freely. We got to have more transparency, and we've got to have an independent investigative agency. Nobody should hold the keys to their own jail. I have an independent investigation agency that investigates me and how I comply with the ethics laws. I don't have control over that. I've been investigated. I've been exonerated too. And you know what? If you don't do anything wrong, you got nothing to worry about. You go to the General Assembly, there are some, I was talking to a watchdog advocate in one of these watchdog groups. She was talking to a state senator last year when they struck down an independent investigative agency. And the senator said, you know what that is? That's one word. It's a Gestapo. That someone else that we don't control gets to watch over us. That is the mentality of some people in the legislative branch. Not all of them, because there were a lot pushing for this, by the way. But we got to have independent review of the ethics actions of all elected officials, and it's got to be transparent. So judicial reform, how we elect our, you can clap. Judicial reform, ethics reform, and government reform. These are 3 broad areas that I wanted to talk to you about. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wind up my remarks right now. I know there's some others that need to talk, but I just wanted to let you know that every year I get a little jaded. I get a little depressed. I'm about to go back into the General Assembly, go through this whole sausage-making fest that we endure every year for 5 months. By the way, I'm pretty sure we can do all the same stuff in about 2 months. I'd like session to be about 2 months and let them do the budget every other year. That way they have to plan for 2 years instead of one. It's more long-term thinking. Other states do it that way. That's just one thing. By the way, I do want to throw this out, Joe, and I know I'm going to end it right here in a second. The gas tax is being debated. One thing I would love to poll the folks in the General Assembly. I've talked to a couple who are interested in this. Anytime you're going to debate whether or not you should raise a tax, there should be a constitutional amendment that constrains your ability to spend it on anything else but what you raise it for. And that's something that I intend to advocate for as we go forward, including judicial and ethics reform. So I could be up here all day, and I could talk about 100 things that I've had to deal with or that I've learned from my dealings in the last 5 years. But listen, over the next several years, I'm going to be focusing on these things. I'm going to be coming to all of your various communities, and I'm going to be going into a lot more detail. But right now, I've returned to my core fundamentals. I've returned to the folks who got me in the job that I currently hold. That's you, the people of this state, the Tea Party, the folks who gave a guy like me who should never have been elected based on the fact that I had no money. Y'all gave me a voice, and I'm trying out here to give you a voice as your Attorney General. I will never forget where I came from, ever. And the day that you think I have forgotten where I come from is the day you need to throw me out of office and anyone else that acts like that. Thank you, Joe, for allowing me to come again. Thanks to all of you. God bless you, and I will be coming to your community here in the next couple of months. Thank you.